Hi Deviants, welcome back to Rationally Insane, the podcast where we defend romance, analyze books, and occasionally spiral about creativity. I'm Rachel D. Oak, and today we're talking about what I genuinely believe is the biggest mistake writers make. And no, it's not bad grammar or adverbs or using the word growled in a spicy scene. Rawr. No, I can't do it. Ugh. But the biggest mistake I think authors make is this: believing you have to be original. That if someone has already explored a trope or a story or a character archetype before you, then suddenly you're disqualified from creating it. Spoiler alert, you're not. And that mindset is killing creativity faster than a TikTok comment section. So, let's unpack where that came from, why it ruins creative joy, and how to break out of it without becoming a plagiarism cautionary tale. First things first, let's discuss the myth of originality. Nothing is new, and that's not a problem. Regardless if you're a new author, a fanfic deviant, a hobbyist, or somebody that has been doing the writing thing for years and years. Every story structure has been told. Every trope has existed since ancient myth. Unless you're Shakespeare, literally inventing words, you are being derivative. And that is normal. It doesn't matter how long you've been writing or how professional you are at it. You are never going to be able to create something new. And nobody wants to admit that because they feel it says something about who they are as a writer. Oh, I can't really say the same thing because somebody has said it before and I'm gonna be like plagiarizing something or just being compared to this author, that author, and I need to be original and reinvent the wheel. No, you don't. Everything you write is derivative, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as liberation. You think you invented Grumpy Sunshine? That trope is older than agriculture, and that's okay. How many of us don't constantly read the same Grumpy Sunshine, the same character pairing, the same romantasy fairy love triangle, and we enjoy it? So think of it from a reader perspective before you start overanalyzing the story that you're trying to tell and thinking that you're not being quote-unquote original enough. As a reader, you are going to absolutely love the same pairings and love the same trope in a lot of different flavors. I always say I love an enemies to lovers in a slightly different font. I've read possibly more than 100 books who have the same dark romance enemies to lover dynamic, and I will continue reading it because it is something that I genuinely love and enjoy. And from an author perspective, I need to give you a little bit of legitimacy and reassurance in you being derivative. I need us to talk about Margaret Atwood for a second. If you don't know who she is, she's the author behind The Handmaid's Tale. You probably know it as the TV show. I'm pretty sure it was a movie in the 80s as well. But the book itself, the story itself, is considered absolutely groundbreaking. But every single horrific thing in that book historically happened to women. If you did not know that, literally every single scene, no matter how dark, Margaret Atwood made it her mission to ensure that it had already happened to women across history. Forced reproduction policies, clothing control, removal of bodily autonomy, religious justification of oppression, the idea of women as property, all of that has happened historically, and she admittedly copied that from the history books, as in copy-pasted the entire scenario and even the political atmosphere that led to it. She is celebrated as a brilliant writer, not because she invented the concepts, but because she contextualized them and she made them resonate with people across all ages, genders, and economical backgrounds. And if somebody like Margaret Atwood can be derivative, then why can't you? And this idea that I must be original, I think really comes from a fear of judgment. A lot of people cling to, I have to be original, not because they care about ethics, but because they're terrified of someone saying, you copied it. Perfectionism loves wearing a moral costume. Oh, I'm not writing because it might be derivative. Sounds way more noble than saying, I'm scared to fail. So we don't write, or we never post our art, or we outline endlessly but never draft the work, or research constantly instead of writing, or even rewrite the first chapter 40 times. We tell ourselves it's because we don't want to be cancelled and publish our art and somebody coming out and saying, oh, you copied XYZ. But realistically, you take a step back, you can realize that this is just a self-sabotage technique that you're employing. And I understand how hard it is to accept that because we see it constantly. Authors on social media being put on blast because they plagiarized something. And in reality, the plagiarism was like a concept or a throwaway sentence. So we tell ourselves and we internalize that as, oh, that's a moral failing on their part. I'm not going to be like them. Instead of having a very neutral and critical analysis of it and being able to say, in this case, it's not plagiarism, no matter what everybody else says. And it just comes down to you having the ability to distance yourself and to say, is this really about ethics, or am I using this as an excuse to be a perfectionist about my work? And therefore, it never being perfect, because let's be honest, nothing will ever be perfect. And therefore, I never have to finish the work. I never have to hit publish. And here's where it gets really interesting, and I'm gonna give my own example. The moment I stopped trying to be original, everything changed for me. When I tell my story and I explain how fast I published my first book, I gave myself a 2-month deadline, people assume that I went from not writing at all to suddenly having a trilogy. But looking back, you would see all of the tiny steps I took. I started by rereading old fics, getting inspired by a throwaway line or a little bit of banter, and that led me to writing random lines. And suddenly I had a poem here and there, and next thing I knew, I was like, holy crap, I'm writing a book. Creativity did not appear magically. The ideas didn't land to me like on a split second. It trickled in because I gave it space. I spent years not creating a single thing to, holy crap, I'm writing again. But there were so many tiny steps. And rediscovering reading was what revived my writing. Those small shifts accumulated. But if you were with me on that journey and you were the little voice in my head, it would have been easy for you to say, oh, you can't write that random line inspired by that piece of banter in that fanfic because that's copying. It wasn't. I wasn't copying the line word by word. I was getting inspired by it. I was loving the character dynamics or how this friend and that friend interacted and making it my own thing. And if I had heard that voice, that self-critical, nagging voice that I can't do the same thing everybody else is doing, I never would have had a book, let alone a trilogy, let alone 8 more novels on the pipeline. Which brings me to my favorite esoteric but also slightly scientific belief that ideas are gifts. I genuinely believe ideas are gifts from the universe, God, your subconscious, or like the collective chaos of TikTok. Whatever you want to call it. An idea you have, if you're a creator, whether that is for a social media post or for a book or for a piece of art, is given to you. It pops into your head for a reason. And if you do not act on it, if you do not write it down, put it somewhere, make a post-it note, send yourself a message, it will go away and it will go to somebody else. And it's a little bit funny, but let me explain my logic. If I give you a gift every single day, in this case the gifts are ideas, and you never acknowledge it, eventually I'll stop. Creativity works the same way. Your brain, if it's constantly giving you ideas and you never acting upon them, it will filter them out and say, well, clearly this is not important to you. Clearly these ideas are not serving you, are not leading to your growth or your goals, so why should I keep giving you creative ideas? When you tell yourself that those ideas are derivative and therefore you do not act upon them, you stop having ideas. And if my mystical language made you a bit itchy, the practical version is your brain is a content blender. You're taking in millions of inputs daily and your brain makes connections. Creativity is literally neural pathways forming. So you either use them or they're going to weaken. And I'm not saying that every single idea that you have needs to be a book, a thing, and acted upon immediately. I am saying that you need to acknowledge them, receive them, and put them down. Not develop them straight away, but just accept them and do something, literally anything with them. In my case, I text myself. My WhatsApp chain is just me chatting with myself for months. And so many of those ideas actually get shifted into something completely different, but they start with an insight, a nugget, a seed that my brain probably picked up from elsewhere. 2 weeks ago, I was on a train to the airport in Stockholm, and out of nowhere, the sentence, "Ballad of a Girl with Not Enough to Lose," popped into my head. And I texted it to myself thinking, yeah, we'll explore this later. Those 9 words have turned since into a character that I'd been struggling to nail and an entire emotional arc. That would not have happened if I hadn't written it down. If I had not taken that idea and actually acknowledged and accepted it, I would not have full-blown characters made today. Which leads me to the most practical writing advice that I will ever give you. Start a document in your computer and call it ideas. When something comes to you, either text yourself or jot it on your notes phone or literally write it on paper. But when you get home, put it in that document, because suddenly you're not staring at a blank page anymore. You have dozens of tiny stories waiting. You have made it into a practical creative habit to have those thoughts and have those ideas and put it out into the world in some kind of way, shape, or form. And obviously we need to do a brief caveat here so no one comes for me. This is not me defending plagiarism. I'm not talking about copying entire plots or character dynamics. That is theft, and you cannot convince me otherwise. There's a reason why plagiarism and intellectual property are legally protected. Inspiration, on the other side, is taking like a vibe, an atmosphere, a theme, a line, a personality trait, and making something new out of it. And you are 1000% allowed to do that and should do that. Because, as I mentioned, nothing is new. But if you want my full rant on book plagiarism rooted into something that is happening currently, I have a podcast episode called Stolen Fix and Writing in the Age of AI. I will link it in the show notes. Go listen to that episode. It's probably going to be a lot more fun and humorous than this one. But going back into our main theme, the biggest mistake authors make is believing they must invent something brand new. I need you to know that you don't. Your voice makes familiar things new. Your lived experience, your perspective, your weird little brain chemistry cocktail, that's where the originality lies. Not on the blank concept of things, but the way you take that concept and you make it your own, and you inject it with you. Just the fact that you write something in your own voice, in your own tone, makes it yours. Just the fact that you took something and injected your voice into it, your own perspective and your own opinions, makes it yours. Even the theme of this podcast, the idea that everything in this world is derivative, is probably derivative in itself. And if this episode makes you feel even 1% more inspired to create, then please do rate the podcast or give it a like wherever you're listening to, because it genuinely helps it push to more people who might need it. And now just go write your derivative masterpiece. Shakespeare would want you to. And I'll see you next week, where I will probably be texting myself another cryptic sentence on public transport and make it into a podcast episode.